Don't disrespect me like that. If you watch me play this character and you don't say it's S tier, I think I failed in my
Yellow's
life
top
and I will
lane.
commit
Listen, come on,
Mitsubishi
come on.
frankly. Today we're going to be talking about Sylveon. I believe Sylveon is viable in all three roles, but with that said, I main jungle, so we're mainly going to be focusing on that aspect of her. Let's start off by talking about our items. Depending on what skills you're using, your items will change. If you're going for the Mystical Fire build, I run Muscle Band, Buddy Barrier, and either Focus Band or Choice Specs. The low ratio on Mystical Fire, and the fact that you're constantly auto-attacking during Mystical Fire because you're free to do so and you can reposition very well, means that I think Muscle Band has very high priority. I run Buddy Barrier because you get your Unite move very early at level 8, which can be very influential at the Dreadnought fight. Then for our last item, we choose between either Focus Band for a little bit more survivability or Choice Specs for a little bit more burst damage. Mystical Fire is a pretty assassin-y move, so Choice Specs is a pretty decent item here. If you're playing the Hyper Voice build, I run Buddy Barrier, Wise Glasses, and Choice Specs or Focus Band. Since you can't auto-attack during Hyper Voice, I find Muscle Band isn't too effective, so I prefer to move over to these SP items to make better use of her ratio on Hyper Voice. For battle items, you can run either Eject Button or Full Heal. Both are good. You can test out them both and see which you prefer. Let's talk about skill builds. I've tested out every single skill build possible on her, and they all seem viable. All her skills are very good, and so they all have merit. With that said, let's move into how her skills function. Her base skills are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go into that too much. I will talk about her auto attack though. Sylveon's boosted auto attack gives her a short burst of MS. This is pretty crucial for repositioning during fights, say when you're using Mystical Fire or when you're about to use a Hyper Voice. You can use your boosted auto attack and then use Hyper Voice right afterward for the short boost of MS and be able to move around and hit your wave. Hyper Voice is a pulsing conal wave in front of Sylveon. It does more damage at the tip, and its strengths are that it has a really low cooldown. You can't auto attack during this, and you cannot change the direction, which are important things to note. You are, however, able to move and reposition during it, which means you can move in order to hit the enemies with the tip of the move. Mystical Fire has been my go-to move so far. Mystical Fire is a dash, and you get flames circling you. If you've ever played League of Legends, you can think of Ahri ult plus her W combined into a singular skill. It focuses the targets you auto-attack, so it won't hit minions until you auto-attack them, but as far as champions are concerned, if you auto-attack them, it will focus them. You can preemptively use Mystical Fire before a fight to essentially get a free cast, as the cooldown starts ticking down the second you use Mystical Fire, not when the flames around you expire. Every time a flame strikes something, it lowers the cooldown of Mystical Fire by a short amount. This means if you can land all the Mystical Fires, the cooldown of Mystical Fire is essentially 2 seconds. Mystical Fire is extremely strong early game. You can absolutely decimate enemies when you're ganking their lanes. You can chase them down the entire lane, and it makes your life at bees so much easier. You clear jungle camps super fast with this. It's a very strong skill. Calm Mind is pretty self-explanatory. You get a special attack increase and a special defense increase, although not as much on that end. The plus, however, is pretty interesting. So the plus essentially gives you a spell shield, and then when you're hit by a spell, it gives you a small shield on top of that. So this means you can use Calm Mind to block key moves, like say a Unite move from Blastoise or Zeraora, or you can use it to block a power-up punch from Lucario, so there is skill expression in there. Draining Kiss is pretty boring. It just does damage and heals. There's not really much to talk about there. If you run out of the range of the tether, you won't get the Draining Kiss bouncing between you anymore. Sylveon's Unite move is rather unique. Sylveon leaps into the air and becomes temporarily immune. Upon landing, she gains Spell Vamp and does a small amount of damage in an area around her. Note that the Spell Vamp does not work against shields. Her Unite move is slightly tricky to use. Unlike pretty much every other Unite move in the game, you can't really just fire it off as it doesn't really do that much damage. At level 13, I believe my Unite move is doing like 700 damage, which is less than a single hit from Mystical Fire does. Her Unite move is mainly to be used defensively for when the enemies are going on top of you. But with that said, you're not going to get the heal from this Unite move if you hit a shield. So the most optimal way for you to use this is for you to wait out the enemy's buddy barriers after they engage and then use it after the fact to get the healing from your ult and from your skills as well. If you're at the first Dreadnought fight, this ult can be used pretty much as a buddy barrier or for the move speed buff in order to be able to run people down so you can delete them off the map to secure Dreadnought more easily. Now let's move on to Sylveon's game plan. I play Sylveon in the jungle, so this will mostly be covering that, but with that said, most of this game plan can apply outside of the jungle as well. Our game plan is pretty simple. We want to abuse her insane early game as much as possible. We want to try to do Dreadnought on spawn with our early Unite move, which we get in a whole level before other junglers. That combined with the fact that we have one of the highest early damages in the game, if not the highest, means that it's very, very difficult for the enemy to be able to contest you with the Dread fight unless they somehow snowballed, which they shouldn't be able to because you have stronger ganks than they do. Once you hit level 4, you become the strongest character on the map regardless of which skill you take. You can use this strength to play extremely aggressively and accumulate advantages on the enemy. You should be able to zone the enemy off of these and maybe even dive them depending on the situation. Even if they're full health, Mystical Fire can actually kill them under their goal. It is that insane. After your first Bs, you want to clear your jungle again and start to play aggressively one more time. You can win outnumbered fights right now, so you can look to take pretty much any fight assuming the enemy doesn't have a Sylveon, as Sylveon is really only countered by Sylveon early game. Remember that your goal is to do Dreadnought as soon as possible to deny the enemy level 9 for their Unite move, and to also abuse the fact that you have the Unite move advantage on them. Ideally, when you're at the Dreadnought, you want to play for the fight. This means don't get the Dreadnought too low when the enemy is in a position where they could potentially steal it. Sylveon has weak Dreadnought secure. Her Unite move takes way too long to actually go off, and it does a very minimal amount of damage. At level 8, I believe it does about 500 damage, and Mystical Fire isn't going to be able to secure it too well on its own either. With that said, her ability to chase down anyone trying to steal Dreadnought is massive. Try to pick off people and then go for the Dreadnought after that. If you can't force them to come into the Dreadnought, starting the Dreadnought to get it to about 75% health to bait the enemy in is a good strategy. In the mid game, you want to continue to look aggressively with Mystical Fire. At this point, your Mystical Fire is doing like 70% of someone's health in a single hit, and that's on a 2-second cooldown. Sylveon has extremely low cooldowns, especially for how big her damage is, so make sure you abuse it. You can win outnumbered fights extremely easily. Once again, I can't hammer this enough. This character has the potential to absolutely destroy no matter who she's against. Sylveon also has probably the best 1v1 in the game, so if you can ever isolate enemy characters into 1v1s, you're almost certain to win that. I don't think I've lost a single 1v1 to a Lucario yet, and that was pretty much considered the former 1v1 champion. In the late game, you become very difficult to kill with your high damage and mobility. Try to deal as much damage as possible while also remembering to save your Unite move for defensive uses. Your Unite move isn't very good offensively, as even at level 13, you're only doing 700 damage with it. So being able to just spam your cooldowns and then use your ults to try and bait out another ult is going to be ideal. You can chase down most characters in the game, so if you see someone in the side lane, you can look to go play aggressively on them. You have great mobility around the Zapdos pit as well, so if you see people mispositioned around Zapdos, you can try and weave in and out of the fight to try and pick them off. That's pretty much it for this guide. If you guys want to see Sylveon gameplay, I'll be playing that on my stream. That'll be in the description down below. You guys can join me in the Discord, that will also be down in the description, and ask me questions there if you have any, or you can ask questions down in the comments below. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, you know, all the good stuff, and I'll see you guys next time.